Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be really taking a look at this book, Give and Take, by Adam Grant. It's all about generosity and success and how those two kind of play together.
Yeah. Give and Take, such an interesting read. It really challenges that whole nice guys finish last thing. Grant breaks down these three main ways people interact: takers, givers, and matchers.
Yeah, and I think that's a great starting point. Let's start with those takers. Who are these people?
Well, takers, they're all about themselves. They're always looking for what benefits them the most.
I bet we can all think of a few people like that, huh?
Oh, for sure. I mean, think about Kenneth Lay from Enron,
Oh, yeah.
making millions while the company's falling apart. Or even Michael Jordan.
Oh, interesting.
He fought for higher player salaries when he was a player, but when he became an owner, totally different story. It's all about keeping those salaries down. It's like, come on, man.
Classic taker moves, right?
Yeah. It's all about maximizing their own gain, even if it means stepping on others.
Okay, that's the taker. What about givers? That seems like the total opposite end of the spectrum.
Right. Givers, they're all about helping others, often without expecting anything back.
I mean, that sounds amazing, but kind of hard to do all the time, right?
It can be. But there are some truly inspiring givers out there. Like, George Meyer, the writer for The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah, love The Simpsons.
He was known for sharing his ideas freely, never made a big deal about his own contributions, even kind of downplayed them sometimes.
Wow, really?
Yeah. He even came up with the word meh, but never cared about getting credit.
That's a good one.
Totally.
Okay, so we've got our takers, we've got our givers, and then you've got the matchers. They're like kind of in the middle, right?
Exactly. Matchers, they're all about fairness and balance.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing.
You got it. They believe in reciprocity, like when you're negotiating chores with your roommate, or trading favors with friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems like the most common approach.
Definitely the most common.
So Grant lays out these three styles, but then he throws in this interesting concept, the taker tax. What's the deal with that?
The taker tax is like, it's the price takers end up paying in the long run.
Okay.
They might get ahead in the short term, but their self-serving actions, they damage their reputation and eventually limit their opportunities.
So it's kind of like they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Exactly. Think about Jonas Salk, the guy who developed the polio vaccine.
Okay, yeah.
He refused to give his team credit for their contributions, and it really hurt his reputation. Some even say it might have cost him a Nobel Prize.
Wow, that's a huge price to pay.
And then there's Frank Lloyd Wright, super famous architect, right? He was known for taking advantage of his apprentices, exploiting them, really.
Oh, I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, it seems like in the end, taker behavior just catches up with you.
Makes you wonder if it's worth it. So we've heard about the downsides of being a taker, but what about the givers? Do they actually come out on top?
Well, Grant says they often do.
Really?
And he has some pretty compelling examples. Take Abraham Lincoln. He actually stepped aside in a Senate race, to let a fellow abolitionist win.
Wow.
That decision, that act of, putting the greater good ahead of his own ambition, that's what helped him become president later on.
So generosity, it's not just about being nice. It can be a real strategy for success.
Totally. And then you've got Jason Geller at Deloitte. He created this really valuable information system, and he shared it with everyone at the company,
That's pretty generous, especially in the corporate world.
It was. And what happened? Well, he ended up becoming one of Deloitte's youngest partners.
Wow, generosity paying off. So how does all this work? How does giving lead to success?
Well, Grant says one big factor is networking. Givers, they build strong, genuine networks because they're genuinely focused on helping others, not just what they can get out of it.
It's like they're attracting people without even trying.
Exactly. Their connections are built on trust and support, not just transactions.
Like, I'm thinking of Adam Rifton, the guy a Fortune magazine named the world's best networker. He built this incredible network called 106 Miles by constantly connecting people and sharing his knowledge.
Right. And when Rifkin needed help launching his own company, guess what?
His network came through for him.
Big time. They had his back because he always had theirs.
Yeah.
It's the power of genuine connection.
Okay, that makes sense. But it seems like there's a risk with being a giver, right? Don't they get burned out or taken advantage of?
Totally. That's a real danger. And that's where this idea of powerless communication comes in.
Powerless communication. That sounds a little counterintuitive. Wouldn't you want to be, like, more assertive to get ahead?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But Grant says this less assertive style, one that emphasizes listening and asking questions, and even admitting when you're not sure about something, it can actually be super persuasive.
So it's like connecting on a human level instead of trying to force your way through.
Exactly. Like Kildare Scotto, he's this top-selling optician, right?
Right.
And he doesn't push sales. He asks customers about their needs, builds trust and understanding. It's this approach rooted in powerless communication that's made him so successful.
That's really interesting. So how does that work?
Well, when you think about it, most people are drawn to authenticity and genuineness.
Yeah, for sure.
It's refreshing to encounter someone who isn't just trying to sell you something.
So how do givers avoid becoming doormats if they're using this more subtle style of communication?
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? Grant talks about the importance of witnessing the impact of your giving, and also a strategy he calls generous tit for tat.
Generous tit for tat. What's that?
Well, with witnessing impact, it's about actually seeing the positive results of your actions. That helps givers stay energized and avoid burnout. Like Conry Callahan. She's a teacher who was feeling pretty burned out until she started a mentoring program. Seeing the impact it had on her students, it reignited her passion for teaching.
Ah, so it's about recognizing that your actions are making a difference. Okay, what about generous tit for tat?
That's kind of a twist on the classic tit-for-tat idea, where you basically match the other person's behavior. Generous tit-for-tat is about being willing to cooperate and be kind, but also setting boundaries. It's about finding a balance between generosity and self-protection.
That's really interesting. So you're not letting the takers walk all over you.
Right, but you're also not letting them turn you into a cynic.
This is giving me a lot to think about. We've covered so much ground, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, definitely. There's so much more to unpack about how these interaction styles play out in different parts of our lives and, how we can all benefit from becoming more generous and thoughtful in our interactions.
And I'm really fascinated by this idea that generosity can actually, like, ripple outwards,
Yeah.
affecting not just us, but the people around us, even whole organizations or communities.
Yeah, that's one of the really cool things Grant highlights in his research. The benefits of giving, they can go way beyond just our own personal success. They can create a more positive, more productive culture in our workplaces, maybe even in society as a whole.
So it's not just about, like, getting ahead ourselves. It's about making things better for everyone. That's a pretty big idea.
It is a big idea. And it challenges that whole, success is a solo mission kind of thinking. Grant's saying we can actually achieve more, both individually and as a group, when we focus on helping others succeed.
I like that. But kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's be real for a sec. Not everyone's a natural giver, right? Some people just seem wired to be more, well, selfish. Can takers really change? Can they become more giving?
That's the big question, isn't it? And Grant tackles it head on. He says, yeah, people's natural styles, they tend to be pretty stable. But he also believes change is possible if we make a conscious effort. It's about shifting our mindset, developing more giving habits.
So it's like retraining our brains to think about the needs of others more than just our own, right? But how do we actually do that? Does Grant offer any practical tips?
He does. He suggests starting small. No need to go for grand gestures right off the bat. Simple things like helping a colleague with a project or mentoring someone who's more junior.
Small steps, big impact.
Yeah, like think of it like building a muscle.
Okay,
You start with lighter weights and gradually increase the resistance as you get stronger.
makes sense.
With giving, as you start to see the positive impact, it becomes more rewarding and it reinforces that giving behavior.
So the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Exactly. Another strategy is to actually build giving into your routine, make it a habit.
So setting aside time each week to volunteer or mentor someone, something like that?
That's a good example.
Hmm.
Or even just making a conscious effort each day to offer help or support to the people around you. Just lending an ear,
Hmm.
or offering some words of encouragement, that can go a long way.
Those small acts of kindness, they can really make a difference. But what about when you feel like you're being taken advantage of? How do you balance being generous with protecting yourself? Especially, with those takers out there.
Yeah, that's where generous tit for tat comes in, remember. It's about setting boundaries, not letting takers walk all over you, but also not letting them turn you into a cynic.
So it's this like balancing act between kindness and firmness. You're not a pushover, but you're not letting a few bad apples ruin your whole belief in giving.
You got it. It's finding that sweet spot, right? Where you're both generous and assertive, protecting your own interests, but also contributing to a positive, collaborative environment.
All this talk about giving, it's making me think about my own style. I think I lean towards being a matcher, but I'm definitely feeling inspired to bring more giving into my life. What about you? Do you identify with any of these styles?
It's great to think about, right? And that's one of the best things about give and take. It encourages us to reflect on ourselves and how we can make a positive impact. It's not just about being nice. It's about recognizing that giving can be a real force for good for ourselves and for the world.
So it's not about fitting ourselves into one specific category, but understanding our tendencies and using them to our advantage.
Right. And being adaptable. We might shift our styles depending on the situation. Maybe we're more giving with family and friends, more matching at work. It depends.
That makes sense. It's about reading the situation and adjusting your approach. But at the end of the day, give and take really highlights this idea that success, it's not a solo journey, right?
Totally. We achieve more when we work together, support each other, create a culture of generosity. That's what Grant really emphasizes.
Like that rising tide lifts all boats idea we were talking about. Focusing on giving creates a more, I don't know, a more buoyant environment for everyone to succeed.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this message, it feels especially relevant now,
Mm.
with all the complex challenges we're facing that require collaboration and collective action.
Give and take offers this like roadmap for navigating those challenges and building a more just and equitable world.
It's not just some like utopian fantasy. It's a practical guide based on real research and real world examples. It gives us hope that even in a world that sometimes feels driven by self-interest, generosity can win.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this whole topic. There's so much more to explore here.
Definitely. Give and Take is one of those books that stays with you. It challenges your assumptions, makes you think in new ways, and inspires you to see the world and your place in it differently.
We've been on this incredible journey through give and take, exploring the world of givers, takers, and matchers, and seeing just how powerful generosity can be when it comes to, finding success in life and work.
Yeah, and it's been amazing to see how these different styles of interacting, they really shape everything, our relationships, careers, even the whole culture of our organizations.
Definitely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into give and take, are there any big takeaways you'd want our listeners to remember?
Well, one thing that really struck me is that Grant isn't saying everyone has to become like this totally selfless giver. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's more about, recognizing that each style has its own strengths and weaknesses and finding that balance that works best for you.
Right. It's about figuring out what works for you.
And understanding the potential downsides of each style too. Yeah.
Yeah, like we talked about how givers need to watch out for burnout and not letting people take advantage of them.
Exactly. And takers, they got to realize that their me first attitude can backfire on them in the long run.
And even those matchers, as much as they value fairness, sometimes they need to, step outside that tit for tat and just be generous without expecting something immediately in return.
It's all about finding that sweet spot where you're generous and assertive, you're collaborative, but you're also strategic.
So it's not so much about trying to fit into one specific box, but understanding your own natural tendencies
Right.
and using those to your advantage.
And being flexible. We might change our styles depending on who we're interacting with.
Yeah, I can see that.
Maybe we're more giving with our family and friends, a little more matching when it comes to work. It all depends.
Makes sense. It's about reading the situation and adjusting your approach accordingly. But in the end, give and take really drives home this point that success, it's not a solo mission.
Absolutely not. We achieve so much more when we work together, support each other, and create a culture of, genuine generosity. That's something Grant really emphasizes throughout the book.
Like that idea we were talking about, a rising tide lifts all boats. Giving creates that more supportive environment where everyone has a better chance to succeed.
I love that analogy. And this message, it feels so relevant now, with all the huge challenges we're facing, challenges that need us to work together and really support each other.
Give and take, it gives us this roadmap for tackling those challenges and building a world that's more just and equitable for everyone.
Totally. And it's not some pie-in-the-sky idea either.
Right.
It's all grounded in solid research and real-world examples.
Yeah.
Gives us hope that even when things feel super competitive and self-serving, generosity can still win out in the end.
Well said. And with that, we've come to the end of our deep dive into give and take. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope this deep dive has, sparked some new ideas and inspired you to maybe experiment with bringing a little more giving into your own life. You might be surprised by the positive ripple effects.
Absolutely. You never know what might happen.
Until next time on the deep dive, keep learning, keep growing, and keep giving.